This is Rabbi Amy Fader. Welcome to Temple Israel for the High Holy Days. We are so glad that you're able to join us. Services will begin in 4 minutes. Shana Tova. This is Rabbi Amy Fader. Welcome to Temple Israel for the High Holy Days. We are so glad that you're able to join us. Services will begin in 3 minutes. Shana Tova. This is Rabbi Amy Fader. Welcome to Temple Israel for the High Holy Days. We are so glad that you're able to join us. Holiday services will begin in just a moment. Shana Tova. This is Rabbi Amy Fader. Welcome to Temple Israel for the High Holy Days. We are so glad that you're able to join us. Services will begin in 2 minutes. Shana Tova.
Let us sing. Come, let us sing. Come, let us sing. Come, let us sing. Havana Shira. Come, let us sing. Come, let us sing. Come, let us sing. Havana Shira. Havana Shira. Havana Shira. Havana Shira. Let us sing. Havana Shira. Havana Shira. Havana Shira.
This is Rabbi Amy Fader. Welcome to Temple Israel for the High Holy Days. We are so glad that you're able to join us. Services will begin in 1 minute. Shana Tova.
Havana Shira. Come, let us sing. Come, let us sing. Come, let us sing. Havana Shira.
This is Rabbi Amy Fader. Welcome to Temple Israel for the High Holy Days. We are so glad that you're able to join us. Holiday services will begin in just a moment. Shana Tova.
Havana Shira. Havana Shira. Let us sing. Havana Shira. Havana Shira. Havana Shira. Let us sing.
Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you could join us tonight as we honor this sacred moments of Kol Nidre. While we wish we could be together to bring in this most precious holiday, we know that what matters most on these days is the prayers of our hearts. So if we can direct our intentions, if we can use our kavanah to turn our hearts towards God and toward each other, we will truly make this holiday of Yom Kippur matter to us. We are told that on these days, God has a book open in which God is looking at all of our deeds and trying to decide what will happen in the year to come. God, we pray that you inscribe us that you write us for a healthy year. We offer our praise and our thanks and our voices and our prayers before you. We join together in the service of Kol Nidre.
V'zimrat yam v'yehili lishua
Ozi v'zimrat yam v'yehili Lishua
Ozi v'zimrat yam v'yehili lishua Ozi v'zimrat yam
V'zimrat yam v'yehili lishua Ozi v'zimrat yam v'yehili lishua V'zimrat yam v'yehili lishua Ozi v'zimrat yam v'yehili
Grant honor to your people and glory to all who have faith in you. Give hope to those who seek you and confidence to those who trust in you. Answer our prayers to bring a time when we all share our blessings with each other. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'chag ner shel Yom Tov. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who makes our lives sacred with commandments and bids us to kindle the light of the holiday. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kidamanu v'hidyanu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who keeps us in life, sustains us, and enables us to reach this day.
Kol Nidre v'sarim v'charamim v'konomim v'chinuyim v'kinusim u'shvuos darna ud ishtabah Kulahon Yahon Shiram Shvikin Shemitzim B'telim Umvutzalim La Shiririn Velo Kayami Nidrana La Nidre Ve'esarana La Esarem Ushavuatana La Shvuot
And on the great path of the Exodus, so many great things happened, but there was also tragedy and error. And Moses called out to God and asked for forgiveness. God responded, "All shall be forgiven, the entire community of Israel and the stranger who lives in their midst, for all who have gone astray in error." Moses prayed, "As you have been faithful to this people ever since Egypt, please forgive their failings now, in keeping with your boundless love." The Psalm Na'amar, Vayomer Adonai, Slachti ki dvarecha. And God responded, "I forgive you as you have asked."
Vayomer Adonai, Salachti ki dvarecha. Vayomer Adonai, Salachti ki dvarecha. Vayomer Adonai, Salachti ki dvarecha.
We continue now with our call to worship, the words of the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai, HaMevorach, Leolam Va'ed.
The words of the sacred prayer, the Shema, words that we are about to begin in a moment. Words proclaim God's unity, and they are bracketed by beautiful liturgical expressions of love. First, there is the stanza of Ahavat Olam, which speaks of God's love for us, and then the Ve'ahavta, which speaks of our love for God. Love is the meeting point where human beings touch the divine, and we think that unity will be realized when our perceptions and actions are all guided by love.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed.
We continue with the words of the Ve'ahavta, followed by Emet.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha
Hayom al levavecha, v'shinatam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitzecha, uv'lechtecha v'derech, u'shachbecha uv'kumecha, u'kshartam la'ot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot bein einecha, u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני, אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני, אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Emet, 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 Emet. Emet ata hu rishon, ata hu acharon, hu mipaladecha. Emet ata hu rishon, ata hu acharon, hu mipaladecha. Ein lanu melech, ein lanu goel, u'Moshiach, u'Moshiach. Emet ata hu rishon, ata hu acharon, hu mipaladecha. Emet ata hu rishon, ata hu acharon, hu mipaladecha.
When Moses Moses and Miriam and the Israelites stood at the shores of the sea, the waters didn't just part for them. No, for them to be able to find their way to freedom, the very first thing they had to do was sing. And so too, in each service we come together, we sing their song, making it our own, and hoping too that God parts the waters and shows us the way to freedom. We sing our Mi Chamocha.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot u'sefer.
Malchutcha, Ra'u vanecha, Bokei hayom lifnei Moshe, Zelianu v'ameru.
Adonai imlo le'olam va'ed.
God, once we have found our way to freedom, we ask that you continue to protect us, that you shelter us always, the shelter of love and protection.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Ashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Ashkivenu, Lishalom. Ashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Ashkivenu, Lishalom. Ve'hamidenu, Shomreinu lechaim. Ufros aleinu, Sukat shlomecha. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Be our shelter from life's storms. Be our shelter from life's storms.
The central prayer of every service is always tefillah, the prayer. But we always start it with something that we call a kavanah, a direction or intention. And we ask God in this kavanah, Adonai sfatai tiftach, God, open my lips. Open my lips so that you can hear the prayers that may be in my mouth, or maybe they're just in my heart. We offer this to you, God, all of our prayers and all of the thoughts of our hearts as we sing tefillah.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agita ilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei
Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Bekonei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevig Ula Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava.
Zofreinu lechaim, melech hafetz b'chaim.
וכותבנו בספר החיים.
למענך אלוהים חיים. מלך עוזר משיח ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, ברוך וברוך שמו, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
Rabbi Herschel Matt wrote, "When fears multiply and danger threatens, when sickness comes, when death confronts us, it is God's blessing of shalom that sustains us and upholds us, lightening our burden, dispelling our worry, restoring our strength, renewing our hope, reviving us."
Shalom Rav, Shalom Rav, Al Yisrael Machatasim Leolam.
Shalom
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam Tasim Ose Shalom B'Romav, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. Ose Shalom B'Romav, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen.
Oseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen.
Oseh Shalom B'Romav, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen.
On Yom Kippur, each person is bidden to raise a fist in protest against all that is wrong in the world. However, the fist of protest is not raised against the world or any of its suffering inhabitants, be they good or evil. Rather, the fist of protest is lowered to one's own heart in the realization that the mending of the world, tikkun olam, begins there. And so, in some communities, it is customary to tap one's chest with one's fist, with each phrase, as transgressions are presumed to emanate from the heart. Please join with us in the reading. Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi, He'evinu, Vihirshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafalnu Sheker, Ya'atznu Ra, Kizavnu, Latznu, Maradnu, Ni'atznu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Tararnu, Kishinu Oref, Rashanu, Shichatnu, Ti'avinu, Ta'inu, Titanu. We have acted wrongly, we have been untrue, and we have gained unlawfully and have defamed. We have harmed others, we have wrought injustice, we have zealously transgressed, and we have hurt and have told lies. We have improperly advised, and we have covered up the truth, and we have laughed in scorn. We have misused responsibility and have neglected others and have stubbornly rebelled. We have offended, we have perverted justice. We have stirred up enmity, and we have kept ourselves from change. We have reached out to evil, we have shamelessly corrupted, and we have treated others with disdain. Yes, we have thrown ourselves off course, and we have tempted and misled. Va'al kulam Eloha slichot, slach lanu, machal lanu, kaper lanu. For all these marks we have missed. Forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol aleinu, ve'alol aleinu, ve'tapeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale dever, ve'cherev ve'rav, me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Shama Koleanu.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vanenu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, ve'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vanenu, Ki ein banu masim.
My father died this winter. It was just a couple of weeks before the pandemic closed down the country, and so I was able to go back to Florida to be with my mother and brother as we laid him to rest. It was one of those moments in my life where I will forever be grateful for the rituals that Judaism gives us, at those times when it's hard to have a clear head or know what to do. I was able to think through all of the details and tasks that have to be done when a person dies, the decisions that have to be made, the arrangements that need to be prepared. Our tradition ensures that from the moment a person takes their last breath, there's a lot for their loved ones to do, and it was a comfort to be able to stay busy and to know that I had the knowledge and experience to make sure that everything went as it was supposed to. These are rituals that I know very well, having sat with so many of you as you have gone through your loss, and it gave me a greater appreciation for the privilege of being able to walk that path with you. Most of us have heard before that grief tends to follow somewhat recognizable stages. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross defined them as denial, anger, bargaining, ultimately acceptance. Judaism, too, has its own time-bound phases, even though it acknowledges that the emotions of a person's grief may not always exactly correspond. There is aninut, which takes place from the moment of death until the funeral is over, that time during which we take care of all the details and keep our minds busy. There is avelut, which is when people sit shiva and surround themselves with community. Then there is shloshim, the 30 days when you first start trying to return to normal, but with some limitations. And then the first year until the marking of the yard site. There is one more step, Yisker, which is what we'll experience tomorrow, the special services that are just for mourners to share their grief. But I would not be honest if I said that the last months of grief have been anything like they were supposed to be. In part, of course, that's because of the pandemic. My parents lived in what has continually been a COVID hotspot since March. So the opportunities I wish I had to go be with my mom and help her adjust to life after my father's death, the time I wish I had been able to visit the grave or thank his doctors, those were just not a possibility. But in part, it's also because my relationship with my father was in and of itself very complicated. My father was a man who, for various reasons, had a very hard time maintaining relationships with anyone, including his immediate family. My brother and I have often said that in many ways, it's as if our father has been gone for years, even though in reality, he was still alive and very much in the world. We did our best to keep our sense of humor throughout his life. Even as we left the cemetery, my mother finally looked back and said, "Ah, your father, he hated everybody." But he was still my dad, even with all of his failings. And now that he's gone, even though we weren't close for so many years, my mourning for him does not seem to be following any of the normal patterns I learned about. The truth is, I've been mourning him for years, and now that he's gone, it's hard to know what to feel. It's a strange kind of grief that I have best heard described as ambiguous loss. Usually, grief is a process of moving through those states or feelings, and when it's terribly hard, there's a clear path to do it. But ambiguous loss can happen even before an actual death has occurred, and so it makes everything feel completely off. The most common times people experience this is with a loved one who has Alzheimer's disease or dementia. You can still see the person you love. They may look like they always have, but you know they aren't. There's a sadness and confusion because the way the person behaved, the way your relationship was, well, it's changed forever. And there are no ways, really, to mark that loss. That mourning feels muddled, and there isn't a way to move forward. There's really not a good term for this in Judaism, but there is one Talmudic idea that comes pretty close. It's an ancient legal status, usually reserved for married women, called an agunah. An agunah is traditionally a woman whose husband disappears, and because he hasn't officially been declared dead, their wedding ketubah, their wedding contract, is still valid. She is unable to remarry, unable to move on. Agunah literally means anchored or chained. She is forever stuck. In ancient times, it usually used to happen with husbands who perhaps had gone on a business journey and not returned, or who were soldiers missing in action. But the problem of the agunah has continued for centuries. In the early 20th century, when mass Jewish immigration from Eastern Europe to the United States reached its height, Yiddish newspapers published a regular feature called The Gallery of Missing Husbands, asking readers to help locate lost spouses. Whether their disappearance was intentional or not, it left thousands and thousands of women anchored and unable to move forward. They couldn't rebuild their lives. They couldn't grieve. The place they were in was just as ambiguous and without closure. They were stuck. These past months, I have started wondering if we haven't become a whole generation of agunot, people who are anchored in place, chained, and unable to move on or to move forward. It's as if we're stuck and moored at sea. We can't come into a safe harbor to complete our journeys, or disembark to go home, or start a new one. We can't unload or unpack our baggage. It means constantly living in liminal space. It isn't only that we're literally stuck in our homes, stuck without ways to meet people, to further our relationships, to find new jobs, or go back to our old ones. Many of us have also found that there were moments we were looking forward to. Graduations, starting new jobs or schools, getting married, celebrating milestones. And now, for the most part, we can't. And without being able to have these moments, there is no opening and there is no closure. Everything seems to us unresolved, and it leaves us with a feeling of tremendous unease. And without a clear end in sight for this pandemic, it's hard to even hold out the possibility for ourselves of when that time will be. You can only postpone an experience for just so long. Without closure, this feeling of ambiguous grief seems never-ending. We can't mourn what hasn't happened because the event may still happen, but we know none of it at all, will ever be the same. Being an aguna or being in aguna doesn't have to be a terrible thing, however. You see, my favorite writer was a Yiddish and Hebrew author named Shai Agnon. That's the pen name he chose for himself. And as you can hear, the word agnon, not only sounds like aguna, it is. Agnon created his name, as many early immigrants to Israel did, and he named himself after his own life experience. Shai Agnon's given name, well, it's actually pretty fantastic. It was Shmuel Yosef Chachkes. But he renamed himself, not because the name was so funny. I think it was a pretty distinguished name at the time, but to acknowledge that he no longer believed and belonged in his hometown in Eastern Europe. While he idealized his home in the land of Israel, he also hated it. He can never adjust, so he just stuck with being stuck and relished it. He was stuck in between the old world and the new, the religious and the secular, dreams and reality. But he chose to say that he was going to be tied down to a place of incompletion. He turned his predicament of being in an in-between space into something that he could name and write stories about that were so powerful, he eventually won the Nobel Prize for Literature. By acknowledging to himself and to the world that he was no longer in the past or in the future, but rather in a place of being in the middle, he was actually able to find a way to redefine himself and ultimately move on. His grief was no longer ambiguous, but rather was something he could pin down and draw endless supplies of creative energy from. Maybe each of us, stuck in this in-between space, between the life we had before the pandemic and whatever is going to come next, maybe we will be able to do the same. To acknowledge that we are all agunot in some way, anchored in place, but still able to create beauty and art in the way that Shai Agnon did. To tell the stories of our past and dream of a future to come. To recognize that even in the in-between places, we can make remarkable, beautiful lives for ourselves. This is a moment of history we are sharing together, and we will continue to keep marking moments in our lives, keeping the cycles of the seasons and Jewish holidays, growing and sharing our stories. Since my father died in another state, we weren't able to have the kind of funeral or shiva that I would have had we all lived in the same place. But when I returned from his burial, I invited a few friends over for a little whiskey and a little prayer and started to share a few stories about his life. It didn't make my memories of him less complicated. It didn't bring the closure that the experts say it should. But it did, for the first time, make me feel less stuck. I recognize that even in an in-between place, a place between mourning and moving on, we have the ability to experience joy and friendship. And those little moments, are what make up the most beautiful parts of our lives. In the year to come, may you find that even in this strange time in history, not knowing what's next, that you are able to create and experience beauty and joy, simcha v'sason. And may we all, one day, find ourselves unstuck. Shana Tova.
We continue now with the words of the Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ביום ההוא ושמו אחד.
Our thoughts turn to loved ones whom death has taken from us in recent days, and those who died this season in years past. Our hearts open as well to the wider circles of loss in our community, and whenever grief touches the human family. Zichronam levracha, may their memories be a blessing in this new year and always. As is our tradition at Temple Israel, we do not read names this evening, but instead we'll read the names of those who died at this time of the year and of all those who died in the past year tomorrow at our memorial Yizkor service. For now, though, we join together, thinking of all those we have lost, in the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Yitzkadal v'yitzkadash shemei rabba, ba'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon u'v'yomemachon, u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'izran kariv v'emru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mavarach la'alam u'amei almaya, yitzbarach v'yishtabach v'yitzpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, Vitadar, vitale, vitalal, shemei dekudasha barichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran ba'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn, and comfort to all who are bereaved. And together we say, Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
My friends, for those of you who are fasting, we wish you an easy fast. We wish you all a good night's sleep, and we will see you again tomorrow morning.